Hello and welcome to my workshop. So today we're going to be starting on a new project, and this is going to be a fun one. We'll be partnering up with another YouTuber. You might know him, Hemistorm. So what we're doing is building him a van. It's going to be in a kind of adventure van style, and he's going to be putting that on an SSD platform. So it should be a good little build. So let's get started with that. So what I'm starting out with here is a Ford, I think it's a Econoline van. And so I basically took a drawing that I found and scaled it up to the right scale we were looking for. And now I'm just kind of trying to lay in some of the details so I can have a good roadmap to build this thing from. So the first step to building these bodies with the vacuum form mold is to get an inner structure that you can put the vacuum forms on, and it has a nice square shape to build off of. So that's what I'm doing here, is just getting the sides readied so that I can get them for the vacuum form later. So this piece is going to be a brace, as well as eventually will work out to be roughly the firewall. And so just trying to get this stuff glued together with the solvent, and then get the whole thing put together. You kind of see it coming together right there. Okay, so the first step in making these bodies is making an inner shell. And so that's what I've done here. I have the general shape of the side from the patterns I've made, taken the front and the back and recessed it back just a little bit so it gives a shape to have the front piece on, and then put in this structure piece, which will be kind of like the firewall, and then these are temporary pieces just to keep the shape. Now once you get the side pieces on, you can pop these off, and this will be perfectly strong enough with the side pieces glued on. The firewall will be notched out however it needs to be to go over the motor, transmission, whatever's there. But I just make it long to begin with. So anyway, that's the start of it. And what we'll do next is to make the side panels, which, like I said, we'll glue on this and bond these together to make one rigid piece on the side. And then you just start to make all the rest of the panels to form this body up. So it's a good start to it, but a lot more to do, so let's get going. So once you get your your general shape figured out and what you want to do, you got to get, what I do is start off with MDF. And so I cut it, as you can see, to the basic shape of the body. And now I'm just slowly sanding away the parts that I don't need, and trying to get some details carved in. So you end up using a fair amount of different shapes and styles and sizes of these Dremel bits, and you kind of get them different ways to kind of make this stuff work, and then come back with sandpaper and just keep refining it. And the MDF sands pretty quickly, so it's not too bad of a process. The one thing I do try is to have some kind of a good dust collection, as well as using a really good face mask, because this MDF is not really good for you. So the body of this van just wasn't quite wide enough to cover the fenders what we needed, so I ended up taking some PVC pipe and making these Fender Flares. Okay, so far we have the basic lower shape of the van kind of roughed out here, and what we ended up doing was taking this expanded PVC and bending and gluing this to the bottom and kind of shaping that to give that bump out, and then took a PVC pipe, heated it up and expanded it out a bit, and then fit this to the body. Cut a little notch in here so that when the vacuum form comes over, it'll give us a nice little natural lip to cut to, and that'll give us our Fender Flares. Another one, the other side just to match, and like I said, this has a lot of the detail in here already. This is a groove that runs down the side, shaped here and sanded back. Got the start of where the hood would go. I needed to come back in here and probably cut a recess, or maybe shape this a little bit to get that in better shape. So the fenders, I've opened these up quite a bit from what's the the van would actually have, and I've done that to be able to fit a 4.19 tire. Now this isn't the tire that will be used, but it's basically the same shape. So what I'll do is get a piece of MDF, put a slight angle on it, glue it on the top, and then cut in and carve in all the details for the upper part. There's going to be just a minimal amount of windows on this thing. It's going to be mostly a panel van with a couple windows here and there, but there'll be some details to put in. So let's just continue on and see if we can get that done. Now I just cut down some more material, and what I did is I put a slight angle on the top, and what that'll do is allow me to get a good flat surface to work off of where the upper part of the van tapers from the more straighter side, and then I don't have to worry about removing so much material, and plus, like I said, it gives me a much flatter and straighter surface to work off of. So lots of measurements back and forth, just kind of drawing out the details and getting things kind of figured out before I start making cuts and start sanding on this. So with this vacuum mold, one of the things I figured out is that if you have too deep of a draw, in other words, if the hole is for that window is just too deep, then it'll actually pull the plastic through so tight and so far that it sometimes will pop it. So what I'm doing here is carefully cutting out the windows, and what I'll do is just basically recess those down slightly, and so it'll give you plenty enough material for the plastic to go in into, but it won't be so far that it will pop it. There's always a lot of reference photos back and forth trying to see the details. Many, if not most of these vehicles I've never seen in real life. You just look at the pictures and keep looking at different angles, and eventually you start seeing things, and it's sometimes you see these things well after you've already built and you have to kind of go back, but try to do your best to get it the first time, but it doesn't always happen that way. So here I'm trying to make a recessed area for where the hood will rest into, and so just taking the sanding drum on that Dremel and kind of drilling, grinding that material away on the fender, and then that'll let the plastic fold over the edge and give you a little bit of a recess area for that hood to go into. So you'll see in the front, I ended up cutting out what I thought was the right amount of material around the headlight and tail light. I ended up figuring out that I didn't need that much material out. I've modified the mold since then, and I just basically just scratch built some pieces into this, the body that I already started on. That's what I said. Sometimes you just get things right and sometimes you don't, and you can always just modify it as you go. So I completed the mold here for the van. This is one side. Now, not all the details are on here, the doors, the rain guard, but the basic shape is here. And what I figured out with doing these vacuum molds is that you can't get the finer detail with the vacuum mold. It just won't conform with the thickness of the styrene that I'm using. So it's best to get the basic shapes, come back and carve in the doors on the plastic and add in the drip rails and different things like that. But I have this basic shape done. I was able to successfully pull both sides of the van, and this is probably the largest single pull I've ever done. I had to modify my vacuum table a little bit to get this done, but very happy with this. It kind of opens up some things, makes it to have a much larger piece in there, gives it a little more structural rigidity, and just kind of makes the whole process easier. So as I said before, I'll come back in and add the details in later, but the next thing I want to focus on is getting a mold made for the rear. So this is going to be, I think they call it a barn door style. So essentially it'll be, two doors that would have opened up. Now these will be fixed, but they would have opened up down in the middle. And I'll get that done, and maybe have time to focus on getting the hood started, and we'll kind of see where we're going from there. Alright, so let's get to it. So the process I've come up with on this is to, like I said, start with the inner structure, build one of the side pieces, or build something that's gives you a good dimension to work off of, and then build more molds, and then vacuum form that piece, and then build more molds off that. So you're basically working your way with molds, then vacuum forming, molds, vacuum forming, and so you're not trying to do the whole thing at once. You're just building a piece that looks good, and then building a mold to fit up against that. So here I'm trying to get some material built up along the edge, so that when I press that mold into it, has a really good firm place to glue against, because really the solvent glue is what's doing most of the work, and the CA glue, or the super glue, is kind of a backer, and like I said before, mostly acts as like almost like a clamp. Allows you to move forward while the solvent glue is drying. You can see just that quick, I've glued it in, and now I can move on and keep working. The solvent glue's still got some time to cure, but it holds in place now. Alright, so the rear end is pretty much buttoned up. I took a piece of MDF and shaped this to fit the sides. And that's kind of what I found the best thing to do is I'll make the one piece, make the other piece, get those all lined up and on the body, and then you can come back and make your mold to fit what's here, instead of trying to work your way all together. You work your way one at a time. What I ended up doing was making this mold, and what I found is that the first one I pulled just wasn't quite right at the top. And the good thing about that, I can just put this up, mark it, reshape it, and then I get exactly what I want. So 2 tries, but ended up with a really nice mold. It has a indent here for the license plate, and a little indent for the where your hand would go for the door handle. And this will be, eventually I'll have a cut with a scribe tool to outline the barn door for the back. So the next thing we're going to do is work on the roof. So instead of having this as just your standard height van, we're going to make it where it's a raised roof for you know, a camper van. So this is going to be a excursion type van, so you'll expect to have it go out and you know, camp and stuff in it, so we get a little bit of extra headroom. So we'll work on the roof, and then eventually we'll just kind of work our way down the front and get the you know, the hood and the, I guess, the bezel for the window set in. And I guess we just kind of continue on. All right, let's get to it. So one thing I thought about doing on this was to have a roof panel that would pop up off the top, and I ended up deciding to go against that. I wanted a little more stronger structure for this body, so I ended up gluing this together. But the basic idea is, you know, you have the flat roof with a that's been cut out, and then you have this bolt-on piece, and so it's kind of like a camper conversion. So most of these, I believe, pop up. Some of them don't, but just gives you a little extra headroom in the van. As you can see, I needed a piece in the front to hold that windscreen apart at the right distance so I can get my measurements. And so you just, you know, add those pieces in. If it's not in the way, you can leave it. If it is, you can just always cut it out later. So this whole process is really a game of careful measurements and careful adjustments to the measurements and just marking things down correctly. And so if you do that, you'll usually end up with a pretty decent piece, and then you can always make small adjustments from there. So yeah, the piece in the front, those are always the hardest ones to get it, the ones that are, I believe it's convex, again, the ones that go in. But, you know, luckily the front of that belt sticks out well enough. I can use that to get that shape dished in. Yeah, they're here just doing some final sanding, getting the final shape and details set, getting that that mold ready. So you see that the center part is all left completely open, and there's really no reason having material there because you have that other cap that's going to go on the top. But I did want to have enough of that to go back on the roof just to give it a little more strength and rigidity until I got the cap glued on. So this is a two-part moldable epoxy. It's a plastic based epoxy, or it's made for plastic. I'm not really sure exactly, but what you do is you just knead the two pieces together until they're basically one color, and then you can press and form and shape this stuff. Okay, so the front windshield and the I guess this cowl piece that goes at the end of the hood is all done, and you'll see that, you know, this is eventually being glued on, but I left it off for the moment. So I just carried this up a little bit to go underneath this cap, same as I did in the back, which will leave the inside open. And so the nice part about it is that when you look up from the inside, it will look like it's raised up and you know, have that look in there. what I wanted to do was to keep as much structural integrity as to this as possible until I get the the cap glued on. And I don't want to glue the cap on until I got this seam in here filled in. So I took some 2-part plastic epoxy, filled in the gaps, and then used some Tamiya putty to come back in and kind of get the fine-tuned stuff in there. So once I get this glued on the top, that'll give me enough structure so that I'll be able to cut the opening out to put the glass in, and also take these temporary supports out of the bottom, and then the most of the body will be pretty much done at that point. I still have to do the hood and the grill, but there's little small pieces to get done, and then we'll be pretty much getting this thing close to being finished. So let's see if we can get through that. We're getting close to kind of finishing up most of the major pieces, and so I'm moving on to getting the hood here. And so it's the exact same process. I've made the molds, then make the vacuum forms, get those installed, and then make another one. So it's the same thing here, just getting some of the measurements down and trying to get the angle and the shape. It's details like this which are really hard, because people tend to take pictures of their cars from a certain angle, and it's usually not one that's from 10 or 12 feet above, pointing straight down at their hood. That's just not one that most people ever take. And so I always find that transition is the hardest one to get figured out. As you can see there, how you have the mold all complete, and you just keep cutting away, and eventually you can pop it out. I take a marker and kind of trace around the inside to give me a good cut line too, and then it's just a matter of using scissors and razor knife to cut this thing out. I think we're at a pretty good place to stop on this video here. We've got a lot accomplished here. The hood, I ended up going back and changing that. I saw that the hood was actually curved in the back, so I made an addition to the vacuum mold, kind of reshaped it, made a new hood, and then reshaped this piece here. And now that has a good, nice good fit up right there, and should look really nice. The rest of it's just really coming together nicely. The only other thing I ended up having to do was kind of reshape and fill in around the headlights and taillights. I kind of misjudged where the opening would be, and not a big deal, just add more styrene in, carved it back to the shape it needs to be. I'll put some filler in that, and you'll never even know it was there. But other than that, everything is really turning out great. I have a lot of little finish work details, a couple of other little things I'm going to build for this to finish it up. But we'll get that out in the next video. Until then, we'll see you on the rocks.